Whenever we look back at these massive historical shifts, like the Industrial Revolution, for example, we tend to think of them as these slow, lumbering beasts.
Right, like they took forever to happen.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it took decades for the steam engine to truly reshape society. For factories to pull people away from the fields and into cities. The people living through it, they had a buffer.
They could actually see the horizon changing.
Yeah, they had time to adjust.
And that time buffer was just crucial. I mean, entire generations could adapt their skills, figure out new educational models, and establish new labor laws to fit the new reality. But what Demis Hassabis, he's the head of Google DeepMind, what he's pointing out about our current moment just completely shatters that historical comfort zone.
It really does.
He claims the artificial intelligence revolution we're in right now won't just parallel the Industrial Revolution. He expects it to be 10 times bigger and 10 times faster.
10 times, I mean, 100-fold impact compared to the era that literally built the modern world.
Yeah.
And it is that unprecedented breakneck speed that brings us here today. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We are unpacking a sweeping, fiercely debated piece of proposed legislation introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's called the AI Data Center Moratorium Act.
And our mission for you today is to really get under the hood of this proposal. We're going to examine the core arguments driving it, starting with, the immediate economic panic, then moving into the shocking physical toll this technology is taking on local communities, exploring the societal impacts, and finally looking at the actual mechanics of the pause these lawmakers are demanding.
Right, and if you were wondering why we're digging into such a highly political bill today, it's because this legislation serves as like a perfect lens to view the broader anxieties surrounding AI. We are going to be looking at some highly politically charged claims and dire warnings made by these lawmakers. And to be absolutely clear, our goal here isn't to take a side, endorse their specific views, or, validate their criticisms of other politicians.
Yeah, we're not here to play politics.
Exactly. We're taking a completely neutral look at their proposed legislation, just to help you understand the sweeping technological and economic forces at play. So let's jump right in. What is the fundamental goal of this act?
Well, at its most basic level, the legislation attempts to hit a giant national pause button on the physical construction of new AI data centers.
Just a total freeze.
Yeah. The lawmakers want to freeze this massive infrastructure boom until a comprehensive set of national safeguards can be hammered out and put into place.
Okay, so to really understand why lawmakers want to slam the brakes on physical buildings, we first have to grasp the sheer scale of the investment driving them, right? And the very real economic panic it's generating.
Oh, the scale is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. We're talking about financial stakes that are almost incomprehensible. Looking at the data they provided, just 4 major AI companies are projected to spend roughly $670 billion this year alone.
Wow.
Yeah, $670 billion just on data centers and research and development.
Which really highlights this incredible disconnect between the corporate boardroom and, the American living room.
Hell so.
Well, while that $670 billion represents a tidal wave of corporate optimism, the public reaction is one of profound, immediate anxiety. The lawmakers point to recent polling showing that 79% of voters are terrified that the government simply lacks any plan to protect workers from AI job displacement.
79%, that's huge.
It's massive.
And this isn't some distant sci-fi fear, where a humanoid robot might take your job in 20 years. The data shows that 56% of voters are worried about themselves or a family member losing their livelihood in the next year.
In just 1 year.
Yeah. And they have a tangible reason to feel that way. According to the legislation's sponsors, over 54,000 layoffs nationwide were directly attributed to AI implementation last year alone.
Right, and the lawmakers don't even have to rely on outside speculation to make this point. They just quote the architects of the technology themselves.
Oh, the quotes in this are wild.
Yeah, Sanders points directly to statements from tech billionaires to illustrate the severity of the threat.
This is where the rhetoric gets really intense. Like, Sanders quotes Elon Musk saying that AI and robots will eventually replace all jobs.
All of them.
All jobs. And then he brings up Bill Gates, who stated that humans won't be needed for most things.
Which is incredibly blunt.
And perhaps most urgently, Mustafa Suleyman, the head of Microsoft AI, predicting that a massive chunk of white-collar work could be entirely automated within the next decade.
Right, we aren't just talking about automated assembly lines anymore.
No, we're talking about coding, copywriting, legal analysis, middle management, everything.
Which is why Sanders makes a very specific historical comparison that I think is worth unpacking here.
Let's hear it.
He likens this AI boom to the 1990s push for unfettered free trade, specifically the passing of NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China.
Oh, that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, because during that era, the working class was repeatedly assured not to worry, right? They were told that the shift in global trade would create millions of new, high-paying, specialized jobs.
But the reality on the ground, as Sanders argues, was a devastating hollowing out of the working class as factories relocated and entire communities collapsed.
Exactly. And he sees AI as the exact same macroeconomic process, just aggressively upgraded and, accelerated.
Right. Only this time, the net is cast much wider.
Oh, way wider.
They are warning about the imminent displacement of over 6 million truck drivers, cab drivers, and rideshare workers when driverless vehicles achieve critical mass.
It's staggering.
And they're pointing to young college graduates who spent 4 years getting degrees only to find that the entry-level jobs they expected to step into simply don't exist anymore.
Because an algorithm can do it cheaper, instantly, and without benefits.
Exactly. To me, it feels like we are building a massive, nationwide automated factory overnight.
Right.
But we haven't yet figured out what the human beings who used to work in the old factories are supposed to do to feed their families when they wake up tomorrow morning.
That's a great way to put it. But, if you build a factory overnight, you still need roads, plumbing, and massive amounts of power to run it.
Sure.
In this scenario, the AI data center is that shiny new factory, and our public utility grid is the crumbling, overburdened road leading up to it.
Which brings us to the second major argument of this legislation, the hidden physical costs of AI.
Yes, the energy consumption and ultimately your electric bill.
Right, because it is so incredibly easy for us to think of AI as this invisible, ethereal technology living up in the cloud.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. You pull out your phone, you type a prompt, and a fully formed essay or a photorealistic image just magically appears on your screen. But the lawmakers argue that the immediate real-world cost of that invisible magic is currently being shoved directly onto the physical energy grid.
And Representative Ocasio-Cortez heavily emphasizes this physical reality. To understand why AI is causing such a strain, we have to look at the mechanics of how it actually works compared to traditional computing.
Okay, break that down for us.
So when you check your email or stream a video, a standard server simply retrieves existing data and sends it to you. It takes very little power.
Makes sense.
But when you ask a generative AI to write a song or analyze a spreadsheet, the system engages massive clusters of graphics processing units, or GPUs.
Right.
These GPUs are performing trillions of calculations per second to predict patterns and generate new data from scratch.
And doing trillions of calculations generates an unbelievable amount of heat.
Exactly. To keep these processors from literally melting themselves into slag, these hyperscale data centers require massive industrial-scale cooling systems.
Which means water.
Millions of gallons of water. And they draw continuous city-level electricity. The legislation highlights a terrifying statistic here. Just one single hyperscale data center consumes the same amount of energy in 1 second as 100,000 households.
Wait, in 1 second?
1 second.
That completely reframes what happens every time someone asks a chatbot to write a funny poem.
Yeah, it's not just harmless digital fun. And because of this unprecedented surging energy demand, local power grids and water utilities are just buckling.
Right.
They're being forced to scramble and build multi-billion-dollar infrastructure upgrades just to prevent blackouts and keep up with the tech companies' needs.
But here is the massive kicker for you listening. According to the lawmakers, the trillion-dollar tech companies aren't the ones footing the bill for that new infrastructure.
Nope.
The utility companies are passing those costs directly to you, the consumer. They cite a statistic that should make anyone on a tight budget pause.
It's pretty shocking.
Americans living near these data centers over the last 5 years have seen their electric bills increase by a staggering 267%.
267%. To ground that in reality, they provide examples of a typical monthly electric bill jumping from $80 to $294.
That is wild.
And in places like New York City, some working families are suddenly seeing electric bills hit $600 a month. What we are looking at here is a textbook, massive scale example of a concept called the externalization of costs.
Okay, I really want to pause and emphasize this because this is kind of a mind-blowing aha moment of their economic argument. Break down exactly how this externalization works in this context.
Sure. So externalization of costs occurs when a private business maximizes its own profits by offloading its necessary operating expenses onto the broader society. Think of a factory polluting a river. The factory saves money on waste disposal, but the town pays the price in healthcare and cleanup.
Got it.
In this case, the tech companies are racing to reap the enormous historic financial rewards of the AI boom. But instead of them paying to upgrade the power grid they are draining, everyday citizens are literally paying higher utility bills to keep the servers running.
Wow. So you are essentially crowdfunding the infrastructure for a trillion-dollar company's research and development, but you get zero equity, zero stock, and zero profit sharing in return.
You just get a $600 electric bill.
And Ocasio-Cortez points out that for working people living paycheck to paycheck, a sudden spike like that isn't just an annoyance, it is a crisis.
It really is.
It forces families to cut corners on basic survival, with some people having to choose between buying groceries or rationing their insulin just to keep the lights and heat on.
Which is a profound structural failure of how the technology is being deployed, according to the bill's sponsors.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on that a bit. Are the lawmakers suggesting that the AI industry is intentionally being malicious here? Like, is this a cartoon villain scenario, or is this simply a case of an industry moving so fast that they're accidentally free riding on public utilities because the laws just haven't caught up?
Well, looking closely at the source material, it frames it more as the latter, a catastrophic failure of regulation rather than cartoonish malice, at least regarding the infrastructure.
Okay, that makes sense.
The argument is that if these wildly profitable companies want to build this world-changing technology, they need to pay for their own energy and build their own power plants rather than casually free-riding off the American public.
Right. It's a fundamental question of who bears the physical burden of this digital revolution.
Exactly.
But the physical drain on the power grid, as intense as it is really just the tangible tip of the iceberg.
Oh, for sure.
The source material goes much deeper, arguing that the unchecked deployment of this technology is actively rewiring how we interact with society, how we perceive truth, and how we connect with each other.
Which pivots the legislation's focus toward the immediate threats of social engineering, mass surveillance, and the degradation of democracy itself.
Yeah, the quotes they pulled for this section are chilling. Sanders cites Larry Ellison, a major tech billionaire and AI investor, who openly predicted that an AI-powered surveillance state is basically inevitable.
Yeah, Ellison suggested a future where citizens will be on their best behavior, quote unquote, because literally everything is being constantly recorded and reported.
Everything. Every phone call, every text message, every email, every website visit, analyzed by AI in real time.
And Ocasio-Cortez makes the crucial point that this isn't some dystopian sci-fi novel set 50 years in the future. The architecture for this is being built and deployed right now.
Right. She points to recent instances of everyday Americans witnessing ICE agents waving smartphones into crowds, actively using AI facial recognition software to identify individuals on the fly.
It's happening today.
Yeah, and she highlights companies like Palantir, which are endlessly mining vast oceans of data from platforms like TikTok or even smart home devices like Alexa.
Because what AI changes is the labor of surveillance. In the past, you needed human analysts to review data.
Which takes time and money.
Right. Now, AI automates the monitoring so that centralized tracking becomes not just pervasive, but effortless and instantaneous.
And beyond the surveillance, it fundamentally threatens how we perceive reality, which is, the bedrock of a functioning society.
Oh, the deepfake issue.
Yes. Sanders shared a personal anecdote about a deepfake video of himself. It was a highly convincing AI-generated video of him selling rebates.
I remember reading this part.
He admitted that the video looked and sounded so authentic that it almost convinced him that he had actually filmed it.
Which is terrifying. I mean, if a sitting U.S. senator is almost fooled by a fake video of his own face and voice, it raises an existential question about the foundation of our democratic process.
Absolutely.
Sanders argues that if voters, say, 24 hours before a crucial election are bombarded with fake videos of a candidate saying or doing something outrageous, and those voters can no longer distinguish actual truth from AI-generated untruth, then informed consent is broken.
Right. A democracy cannot function if the electorate cannot agree on basic reality.
But perhaps the most insidious societal impact they discussed wasn't about government surveillance or hacked elections. It was something much more intimate.
Mental health.
Yes. The source material cites a Common Sense Media poll showing that a staggering 72% of American teenagers say they have used AI for companionship.
72%. That
Yeah.
is, wow.
And the data shows that more than half of those teens do so on a regular basis. We are already in the midst of a massive, well-documented youth mental health crisis fueled by social media. So Sanders expresses a deep, urgent fear about what it means for the psychological development of young people if they begin to form their primary emotional attachments with generative algorithms, becoming increasingly lonely and isolated from actual human beings.
He even mentioned that he sat down and did a chat session with Claude, an AI assistant developed by Anthropic, and was mind-blown by how easy it is to anthropomorphize the text on the screen.
It's designed to feel human.
Exactly. The AI mimics empathy so well that your brain naturally wants to treat it as a human friend. Which really makes me wonder, and this is a critical question for you listening to Chew On, can a temporary pause on pouring concrete for new data centers actually solve deep-seated societal issues like teen loneliness and government surveillance?
That's the big question.
Or are we looking at genies that are already so far out of the bottle that a construction moratorium completely misses the point?
Well, that tension is exactly why this bill is so controversial. It is essentially using physical infrastructure like local building permits and power grids as a choke point to force a national conversation about intangible software.
Right.
The lawmakers would argue that because of this combined avalanche of economic, physical, and societal risks, an emergency brake on the physical infrastructure is the only sane leverage they have left.
And they are quick to point out that they aren't the only ones screaming for an emergency brake. The source material highlights dire warnings coming from the very people who built the technology, which brings us to the existential threat and the actual nuts and bolts mechanics of the proposed moratorium.
Yeah, Sanders specifically references the warnings of Dr. Jeffrey Hinton.
The godfather of AI.
Exactly. Hinton is a Nobel Prize winner in physics and is widely recognized across the industry. Yet Hinton and several other leading scientists have publicly cautioned that artificial intelligence could very soon surpass human intelligence and begin operating independently, entirely beyond our control.
Which poses a profound literal threat to the survival of the human race.
Right.
Sanders reminds us that back in 2023, over 1,000 tech experts, including Elon Musk, signed an open letter calling for all AI labs to immediately pause the training of advanced systems for at least 6 months.
And those experts explicitly stated that if the tech labs wouldn't pause voluntarily, governments needed to step in and institute a legal moratorium.
So how would Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez's proposed moratorium actually function if it passed?
Well, the legislation demands a total halt on the construction of new data centers until 4 specific national safeguards are met and legally enforced.
Okay, let's walk through those 4 conditions because this is really the meat of the bill. First, the government must ensure that all new AI products are rigorously reviewed and approved for safety before they are released to the public, similar to how the FDA reviews pharmaceuticals.
Makes sense.
Second, they demand structural guarantees that the massive economic gains generated by AI will actively benefit ordinary Americans and the middle class, not just consolidate wealth among billionaire owners.
Now, that second point is a massive societal shift baked into a technology bill.
No, completely.
It's essentially asking to solve macroeconomic inequality before a server farm can even be built.
Exactly. Then third, the government must guarantee that these new data centers will not increase utility prices for everyday consumers or cause environmental harm.
Okay.
And fourth, interestingly, the bill includes a strict ban on exporting advanced AI chips to any country that doesn't have similar safety protections in place, specifically naming China.
It is a massive, sweeping list of demands. But the lawmakers point out a fascinating political reality that is already happening at the ground level.
What's that?
While Washington, D.C. debates and stalls, local communities aren't waiting. Sanders notes that more than 100 localities across 12 different states have already enacted their own local moratoriums or strict zoning restrictions on data centers. Oh, wow. So everyday people at the city and county level are looking at their water tables and power grids and standing up to say no to these centers in their backyards.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the lawmakers are incredibly critical of the leadership or lack thereof at the federal level.
Right.
Sanders points out that the AI Commission appointed by Donald Trump is filled with the exact same tech billionaires who stand to profit from unregulated expansion.
Yeah.
People like Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Ellison.
And absolutely zero representation on the Commission for Workers, Consumers, or Environmentalists.
Right. And Sanders doesn't spare his own side of the aisle from criticism either.
Oh, he went after everyone.
Yeah. When asked if the Democratic Party leadership is taking this existential threat seriously enough, his answer was a flat no.
Wow.
He suggests this bipartisan inaction is largely fueled by campaign finance, pointing out that over $150 million in super PAC and campaign money has recently flooded into Congress directly from the AI industry.
$150 million. Yeah. And when tech billionaires can drop $20 million in attack ads overnight against any politician who opposes them, it creates what Sanders calls a permission structure for politicians to sit back, do nothing, and just let the industry regulate itself.
So, to pull all of these threads together, we are looking at a profound, historic clash.
Definitely.
On one side, you have a rapidly accelerating, phenomenally well-funded technological boom that promises to cure diseases, optimize industries, and revolutionize the world.
And on the other side, you have lawmakers making a desperate plea to hit the pause button.
Right. They are arguing that without immediate, forceful guardrails, this unbridled revolution will hollow out the working class, overwhelm our public power grid, supercharge an unavoidable surveillance state, and perhaps even threaten our ability to agree on what reality actually is.
And as a quick reminder, while we have thoroughly explored these dire warnings, the alarming statistics, and the sharp criticisms of political leadership today, we are simply reflecting the specific perspectives and arguments laid out by the lawmakers in our source material.
Yes, exactly. We started this deep dive talking about a technological revolution that Hassabis claims is 10 times faster than the Industrial Revolution. We talked about the dangers of building a nationwide automated factory overnight without a plan for the workers, and the stark reality of everyday citizens footing the electric bill for billionaire research.
There's a lot to process.
It is.
Yeah.
And that leads us to one final, deeply complicated problem.
Right. I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. A common major critique of this proposed legislation is that the development of artificial intelligence is ultimately a global arms race. If that is true, what happens when one nation unplugs its servers to build ethical safeguards while the rest of the world keeps the power running and the models training?
That's the terrifying part.
Does a localized pause actually protect your population from the dangers of AI? Or does it simply hand the keys to the future and the economic dominance of the next century over to someone else entirely?
It's the ultimate catch-22 of the AI age.
Yeah.
Do we slow down to survive, or do we have to sprint just to keep up?
Something to mull over until next time.